Hello folks, this is Prashant. In this series, we will understand what is mapping and configuration file in Hibernate. So first start with the mapping. Mapping file is the heart of Hibernate application and every ORM tool needs this mapping. And mapping is the mechanism of placing an object property into column of a table. Mapping can be given to an ORM tool either in form of XML or in form of annotation. While we writing an Hibernate application, we can construct one or more mapping files. Means a Hibernate application can contains any number of mapping file. So an object contain three properties like identity, state and behavior. But while we storing an object into database, we need to store only values. That means state. But how to avoid identity and behavior? It's not possible. So, in order to inform what's value of an object has to store in which or what column of a table will be taken care by mapping. So, mapping can be done using two ways. One is XML and another one is annotation. So it is introduced in Java 1.5 version. So here is the syntax of mapping XML. So here is the class name and properties. So in the class, their class name here is the POJO. So POJO stands for plain old Java object. It's basically just an entity defines to stand. Here is the example. In the POJO class, inside that variables are private and getter and setter. So we will understand later. Here is the architecture. So let's talk about the configuration. So configuration is the file that loaded into an Hibernate application. So in the configuration file have three type of information: connection properties, Hibernate properties and mapping file names. So we must create one configuration file for each database we are going to use. Suppose if we are using any two database like Oracle, MySQL or any, we must create two configuration files. Or if you are using four database, then we need to create four configuration files. Like below is the example: n number of database, that many number of configuration files. So in the configuration, we can write the configuration in two ways: by XML form, and second is by writing property file. But here it is deprecated, like we don't have annotation here in Hibernate 1.x and 2.x. We defined only configuration file by writing dot property. But from 3.x, XML came into picture. So from now onward, mapping is XML and annotation, and configuration we are use XML, and dot property is the old style. So here is the syntax of configuration. So above all, the relation to connection starts like a driver, URL name and password like this, and the second is Hibernate properties, like what dialect, SQL and Hibernate DB, create, update, delete, we can understand deeply in further series. And the last is mapping resource. So here is the simple Hibernate application requirement. So an Hibernate application contains 4 files basically that, that are shown below: POJO classes, mapping XML and configuration XML, and one is our main method, our logic that we need to for insertion, deletion, updation, and all these. Further series we can understand. So in the Hibernate application, number of POJO class, that many number of mapping.xml file, and only one configuration.xml and our logic. So let's start. What is POJO? So POJO is simply a Java file. No need to extend any other class or implement any interface. And you can say that POJO class contains only private properties, variables, and for each a setter and getter. In the further series we will understand, like later, like Lombok have came into picture, so we don't require the setter and getters. So below is the example. For example, there is a employee.java class. So here is the private variables and setter and the getter. So let's understand how we can create the POJO class in any framework. Here is the GitHub link I will provide in this video link below. So you can just download the, understand the file and what's the configuration and all this. And if you want to see the PPT, I have uploaded it. So let's start. You can choose any browser, like any framework like Eclipse or STS or IntelliJ, anyone. I'm just picking the STS. So you need to select any workspace. So I'm just created one workspace here. So you need to just go to the file and create a Java project. Employee, project name, employee. That's it. So we need to create POJO. So I'm just creating here a package com dot test class, POJO class. So POJO class variables are private, as we know. So I'm just using 1, 2, 3 private variables. And there is one recommendation here. Don't use the int. We need to use integer. Ename, address. So we need to write here setter and getter. So there is one shortcut here. Just click Alt plus s. You will generate getter setter. So I'm just creating all getters and all setters. And here you can use constructor also, zero argument, or can you string to string or anything. So here is that how we can create the POJO class. So you can choose any, like there is, you can create one more POJO, like I'm just creating person. So here you need to write their setter and getters, like person ID, like you PID, person name, person address, like this, or any. So here is the mapping XML for POJO. Mapping file related to the above POJO classes. So here is for, there is for example employee.hbm.xml. So here is the file, and this is the default generator class used by Hibernate. If the generator class is assigned, then the programmer is responsible for assign the primary value to the object which is going to save into database. And we will discuss generator also in a further lecture, how many types of generator and what's their functionality and all this. So in the last property name e-designation, we have not write any column name. We only specify the property name, that is e-designation. That means in the database, column name for e-designation property will also be e-designation. In this case, we can ignore the column attribute to write. So we will see in Eclipse. So you can download the code here. So I'm just copy paste here. So you need to create one XML for Hibernate. Just go to file and create any name. I'm just using employee dot, then we need to use hbm dot xml. So in the first section here is the DTD, and after that it's a table, database table. After the program will be run, the table will be created and e column will be created, and this is the primary key programmer will, and this we have already discussed. So let us start with the configuration dot configuration XML. For example, there is configuration.cfg.xml file. Here is writing like this. We have understand what's the meaning and all this. So here is the scenario. If I am using the MySQL, then we need to write MySQL user and the password detail. So in the section line number 9 as line number 10, sorry, you can understand if your driver is Oracle or any different driver, you need to specify here. And after that there is dialect properties, whatever you need to have. And in the line number 23, mapping resource like employee.hbm.xml. So let's understand. Just project, click on new and file, just write hibernate.cfg.xml. You can download the DTD also if you have no internet connectivity. So you can simply click on this, enter, and you need to download this file and copy the property and location. Then you need to specify this only. So it will work as a offline. So the same thing will be do with the mapping also. You need to copy Hibernate mapping and enter, and just specify the offline location of your system. That's it. Here I am using. That's it. Yeah, that's it. In the further series, we will understand how we can create Hibernate application, like a crude operation we can understand, like session factory and database, what's the meaning and all this functionality we